Welcome to the Connected Teamwork podcast by Growth Leaders Network. How do we learn to truly thrive together? How do we stay connected to our authentic selves, each other, and our purpose as a team, especially when challenged? How do we unlock the deeper levels of group intelligence? Enjoy this episode of the Connected Teamwork podcast and learn practical tools to evolve the connectedness of your team to its next level.
And welcome to the Connected Teamwork podcast, where we help leaders and teams connect more deeply to their innate potential. We are in episode 69. I'm your host, Hilke Faber, and together co-hosting with Carson Heddy. Carson, how are you today?
Hilke, I'm wonderful. Always blessed to be with you and excited about today's topic.
Me too. Today, we're going to talk about Connected Team Practice number 8, making amends promptly and doing it for integrity. So a little bit of background on this. Saying I'm sorry often happens after the storm hits. Somebody's lashing out or somebody said, I'm very disappointed you did this or that. It's not too late. And yet there's such power in finding a way to make amends intentionally, in our own accord, by our own accord, and because we know this is the right thing to do. How do we know that? Well, something in us knows. Think about the last time you did something, you're like, yeah, that wasn't quite it. Maybe it was today, maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was last week. I can think of something where it's like, yeah, no, I wasn't at my best self. And nobody has to tell me that. Sometimes I get feedback and we get feedback about that. So as you're listening to this podcast today, I'm inviting you to be really honest and really kind with yourself, because those two are the core ingredients: deep honesty and deep kindness, to be able to make amends. And we're not doing this so we are good people. Also, we get a mark from somebody else. We're doing this because it's something we have to do it. And the other reason that we do it is because we are not alone on this planet. We are working together with others, and our behaviors and intentions and feelings have an impact on others. So we own that. And as a way of saying, I care about you, we also let them know that we care about ways in which we inadvertently, or maybe sometimes advertently, impacted somebody else negatively. Carson, tell us about when you hear amends, making amends. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
First thing that comes to mind is what you said earlier, as far as sometimes the frequency of the opportunity to make amends. This isn't sometimes a comfortable muscle for people, because when you make amends, you're expressing a vulnerability. There's a chance that your amends won't be taken the way you want it to be or accepted. There is a chance as well that the outcome or the speed of outcome isn't what you desire it to be. But I think when I try to get really grounded in amends from a lens of connected teamwork, I think about the importance of making amends to connectedness. But I also think about a lot of the things that you and I have talked about up to this point through the other practices, how we can make sure that we're going into connectedness with eyes wide open, how we can make sure that we are frankly seeing others, which is often can be the impetus for amends. When I neglect to see someone's perspective or to proactively seek someone's perspective, that is often a basis for amends that I attempt to make, and trying to be communicative in that, but also progress over perfection. This has been a muscle that I've really tried to develop over the last few years, more so in relationships that are key to me. And it's not even just in my leadership. It's also in my own household, with trying to set the right tone with my wife, with my kids, and to lead by example. What's the line? Saying I'm sorry is the hardest part. And so sometimes, being able to drop the armor, drop the guard, and to show up hat in hand, it can make all the difference in the world, because it reestablishes, frankly, our humanity and our credibility.
Yeah, I love that making amends reestablishes our humanity and our credibility. Now, our ego, which we've also called our crocodilian mind, sees it somewhat differently, right? Because making amends is maybe from the crocodile's perspective, like, no, I shouldn't do that. Maybe I can get away with it. They didn't see it, so maybe I can get away with it. So this is me saying that, no, I spoke over you. That's one thing I sometimes do. Or I go at it alone too fast. That's another one of my frequent character defects, you could say. And maybe my colleague or my husband didn't catch it. The thing is, I caught it. From my crocodilian perspective, my ego perspective, Hilke has to be perfect. Like he came here perfect, he's gonna leave perfect, and everything else is perfect, right? And that's not true. Like I make mistakes every day. Like when I wake up in the morning, I tell myself, get ready for some mistakes. And mistakes are just simply like you make some goofs. You're goofed, right? So the first thing is to be able to say, in my humanity, I know I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm willing to make up for it. Now, that's the second part of an amend, which making amends that the crocodile does. It also can use, once it says, oh, this is a cool tool. Like, look, because when I make amends, people tend to come closer to me. Like, oh, okay. And often people say when you make an amend, in many cases, oh, it's okay. Many people will say, oh, that's okay. No, wasn't a big deal. And part of you might have thought, oh, maybe I didn't have to say it in the first place. Because you noticed it, right? But one of the things that crocodile does is it says, oh, I can use this amends, I'm sorry, as a relationship maker. Janet Jackson, in a movie that I don't recall the name of, says, don't give me another sorry. So there's a sense of, when I'm making an amend, this is not just empty words. And this is why I like the steps of making amends. It's I'm owning what I did. I talked over you. I'm sorry. Number two, the impact. What is the impact on you? And my colleague might say, I felt not heard, or I felt belittled, or any of those. And then the third step is not to say, well, that was nice, now I can move on. Offer to make reparations. I know in today's time and age, that's a very term with a lot of baggage. I find making reparations very freeing. It means something's out of balance, not wrong, I'm not wrong, there's something's out of balance. I'm going to do something to reestablish balance. And that can simply be saying in the next meeting, I'm intentionally going to ask you to, or invite you, or not speak, or let you go first. It also can be an amend to myself, that I'm actively changing something. And in some cases, listen, there's money or service involved. Like I hurt somebody, just like when you hit somebody's car, some people will drive off and do that. It doesn't feel so good. Like, that was mine. I'm going to put this back into balance. You make reparations. The third step. And the fourth step then is to follow up. To actually do it. And if appropriate, check in with the other person and say, hey, how are we doing with, in this case, speaking up? So Carson, when you think about this, in making amends, what's important to you?
Yeah. First off, I like to look at some of the reasons that I may have shown up improperly. What was the cause for the amends that I need to make? And Hilke, we've talked about, how we often show up judgmental, not necessarily because there's malice intended, but We may be pre-programmed or have biases that, make us show up to certain scenarios or situations with judgment. Frankly, also from my vantage point, sometimes it's imposter syndrome. I may, my reaction might be to, to go into a mode where I'm leaning on what I'm comfortable with. And I could show up defensive, or I could show up with a lot of activity to almost like try to distract from like that area where I feel uncomfortable, because it's hard to feel uncomfortable. Feeling uncomfortable sometimes prompts us to have reactions. And as I've hopefully gained some discipline and wisdom over the years, I've really tried to look at what is the source of my discomfort? What is the source for my judgment? And what is it, why is it prompting me to maybe act in this way? And so to be able to, I go back to kind of your first step, how do I own this fully? And, no spin, no excuses, no fluff, just being able to say, hey, I messed up there. I showed up in this way. Here's why. I'm working on that, or I understand, like you saw defensiveness from me, and here's the reason why. And I apologize for that. I should have done a better job in seeing you in this situation, understanding your perspective. I think sometimes we do this as well in the rush to try to empathize. We come from a good place, but so often we hear someone's story and we rush to say, oh my gosh, yes, I went through that exact same thing. It was 10 times worse when I had to go through it. This is what you need to do. But that's not what anybody's looking for. People aren't always looking for a problem solver. They're looking to be acknowledged. They're looking to be seen. And so that's why when somebody has something, and this was something that was ingrained in me years ago by a great leader, is I may have an entire one-on-one with somebody derailed in the first 30 seconds because I ask, how are you? And they'll say, oh my gosh, this happened. And I may have had a preset agenda for this conversation, but suddenly that goes by the wayside. I want to zero in. Tell me more about that. Mm-hmm. And frankly, that has helped me tremendously in foregoing some of the areas where historically I've needed to make amends, is because I've rushed to go in and say, oh yeah, that's awful. Let me know where I can help, or, this is what I did when this happened to me. But it's no, tell me more about that. And getting that to be more of my step of saying, tell me more about that, has helped me tremendously in setting a foundation for a less judgmental and less reactionary situation. But when you fully own where you need to make amends and you don't make excuses, but you try to basically say, hey, I acknowledge that I could have done this better. I'm trying to get better at this. Those types of things really help me to land that step.
What I really like about making amends and witnessing amends is the truthfulness and the energy that comes with that. Like, as I hear you speak about what you make amends for, and when I think about the amends I've made in the past, or I've been made to me or made to myself, there's an energy of sincerity that is disarming, brings me closer to me, brings me closer to you, and makes me want to be part of the situation, the team, the relationship, because it creates a sense of safety. Like, if you have a team where nobody makes amends, then basically we're saying we're all perfect. And also, we do not impact each other. Like, when you do these things that are reactive, they don't have an impact. Well, they do. We are human beings, right? We're human beings. We're going to take a break in a moment. After the break, I want to share a little bit about an amend that I made in the past to somebody, and how hard it was, and also how liberating it was to do that. So as we're having this conversation and as you're listening, I'm inviting you to think about people that you need to make amends to, and you know which ones they are. And maybe you're not ready yet, and that's okay. Put them on the maybe list. Maybe there's some people that you know you need to make amends to and you're ready. Put them on the yes list and reflect on, how could you do this very simply and straightforwardly? Maybe you practice those 4 steps. You own it to the person. You inquire into how does this impact you. You offer reparations, not fixing it, but saying there's something I want to do to bring things in balance. And then you follow up after a while. So we've been listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast, episode 69. We are talking about making amends. See you after the break.
You are listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Do you want to learn more about building the next level of connectedness in your team? Please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Before I share my example, I just want to ask you as you're listening, what keeps you from making amends? And just be honest. It's totally human that you're not trampling at the bit to saying, oh yeah, I'm going to know. But just be honest with that. And maybe the first amend is to yourself and saying, yes, I find it very hard. And I maybe have been judging myself for this thing that I did. So I can make an amend and saying, okay, yeah, I need to come back into balance with myself. So a way to offer reparations to myself is to be kind, to accept, and to tell myself, hey, I'm maybe not ready yet. So maybe I can do something. Maybe I talk to a friend or counselor or somebody or colleague. And all these things can be almost the same person, depends on where they are. And say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Can you help me through this? Right. So an amend that I made in the past was I was working on a project. This is 2008, so it's a little ancient history, which makes it a little easier to talk about. I was a facilitator on the team, and on the day that I was supposed to fly to Paris from New York City, my then boyfriend broke up with me. And I was devastated. I was devastated. And so I called my then boss and I said, I'm so sorry. So I made an amend. I totally don't feel up to it. So I'm not going to take the plane. And he was very quiet. And he said, I want you to think about that again. And I was like, no, but. And I insisted on not going. And I was kind of pissed off at him for not being more understanding, as I thought back then. And I didn't go. And I thought I had practiced self-care, quote unquote. I talked to my boss then, about a week later. And I wanted to appreciate him for being so generous in taking care of this. He opened the conversation with, so Hilke, what have you learned from this experience so far? And something in me is like, ooh. And then he gave me some very direct feedback. He said, Hilke, what you did is totally unacceptable to me. We are part of a team. And because you canceled last minute for a non-life-threatening situation, the other team had to stay up late to do your modules of this training program that they weren't aware and familiar with. And yes, we have backups, but it caused a lot of stress on the team. And I realized that you had a difficult conversation, and I sensed that you made that decision without talking with me about it. You did it unilaterally. Ouch. I was still hurting from my breakup. So it took me another 2 weeks before I actually made a real amend. So I made a totally fake amend at that first moment where I said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming, which was using the apology to then put harm on somebody else. I'm sorry, I'm going to shoot you. That's not an amend. That's violence. And took me another 2 weeks. And then I said to my boss, I am so sorry for what I did, for letting not taking care of my own emotions and being unilateral and putting the team in that situation, how did it impact you? And he told me about it. And the reparations that we agreed on was that I was going to do some very intense emotional cleaning on myself. So I did some very intense work on myself so that that kind of behavior wouldn't happen again. I also took a pay cut. This was not the first time it happened. Back in 2008, I had a few non-performance issues happening, meaning I wasn't performing well. And the follow-up was intense. It wasn't an event that was like, oh, phew, I got through with this. It took me a few months, to 6 months of intense work on myself, and also being much more active in the team, proactive. And, it wasn't all happy ending. I did get the money back and recognition. And then after a while, this company had awards for working on self, being a contributor to the team, and so on. And I got the award for working on self. But man, I tell you, my crocodile had a field day with this, because I'm sorry is not a way to excuse myself in unacceptable behavior. I'm sorry is taking accountability and making it better. Carsten.
Wow. First off, I applaud you for that ability. And I also, when I think about myself and, similar experiences, I was contemplating, what are some of the reasons that, I've most engaged in behavior that has required or necessitated amends being made. And it's almost always my own short-sightedness or rigidity, whether it's I think I know best because of my sum of experiences, or it is simply I'm so caught up in my own day-to-day or my own situation that it's, I don't have that desire or strength at that moment to consider other perspectives. I would say probably a great scenario that pops out to me was, there was a pretty significant change that transpired for me several years ago in my career. And at the time, it resulted in me being laid off. But there were a lot of people that I was hoping, or for whatever reason, I thought would stand by me in the thick of all of this. But there were some politics involved in the corporate decision that was made that kind of moved me out of this organization. And there were opportunities for me. I ended up coming out okay in the end because of some of the changes, but I frankly, was very reactionary, and I was not overly eager to collaborate with or really hear some of people's excuses or reasons why they weren't, like rushing to my aid or, talking to me amidst some of these challenges. I was completely blind to the fact that, frankly, they were also under very similar pressures. And I was blind to that, and I didn't care. I was young, much younger. I was immature, and I didn't have the discipline and the polish and the experiences that I do today to be able to look at that now in hindsight. The amends that I had to make was being able to go to some of these folks and literally just say in those moments, I was so consumed by my own emotions and feelings. And I am, for that, I'm very sorry that I didn't see or even try to see your point of reference, your experience, your perspective. And it's a humbling situation. Mm-hmm. And you hit the nail on the head, Hoka, because it is often our crocodilian instincts or reaction, or it can be our own ego that will prevent us from looking at things in this way. But everything that I preach from a leadership perspective, which is, obsessing over people and investing in your sphere and how you can lift others up and working on your reputation or de-risking other people's decisions to put you in the position that you seek, it all comes down to how you show up and how you proactively work to connect. And there is frankly no better way to connect than being your authentic self, being vulnerable. And there is no bigger vulnerability than admitting when you're wrong.
So, and there it is. There it is. To me, it's when I think about what you said about making amends, or often when I'm lost in my own world. And that's about making amends to another. And it's also about amends to myself, because the own world is not even my authentic self world. It's often because I'm so caught up in some thought pattern. Like the amends that I often have to do to myself is, I talk about judgment. I judge others, which is what our reptilian brain seems to do. And I judge myself, right? And the self-judgment and making reparations with being kind, that is, I think, the meta amend that I almost need to make daily as a way to retrain myself from the current state of consciousness that I operate in. So maybe as you're listening, think about what behavior do you own yourself that gets in the way of your connectedness with others? And what behavior gets in the way of your connectedness with your authentic self? Maybe you're overworking. Maybe you are like a couch potato and not taking care of your potential, like wasting your potential in a way. Maybe you think you're small. Maybe you always need to be in the foreground. Whatever pattern you learned, the amend is not like I'm going to just wham bam fix this, but the amend is often being kind with myself, acknowledging it, and then deciding to make the next micro step to change it. So by maybe being kinder to myself as I have this negative self-talk, or by doing something different in the meeting, or maybe speaking up, or maybe asking another question, or whatever it is. So Carson, as we're getting towards the end of our conversation today, what counsel do you have for people that are just not ready? It's like, no, I don't want to do this.
I think you have to be intentional about the desired outcome, because at the end of the day, I don't think people create scenarios by which amends might be necessitated, or perhaps fail to execute on making amends out of reasons of malice. I believe in positive intent. And so, I think sometimes, again, it's, you instilled this in me years ago, and I use this all the time. It's that getting that balcony view of the situation. Sometimes you got to take a step back and look at the scenario, look at where you're impeding your own growth and progress, but also where maybe there is a breakdown in communication. And I even look at relationships today where there's friction in the workforce, in my working environment. And what have I done to maybe contribute to that? How have I shown up maybe the wrong way? And so my challenge to you is not necessarily to don't put pressure on yourself to go out and just start making amends, because again, like you said earlier, Hilke, then it's empty, it's hollow. A true amends is a gift. It's not a transaction. You're investing in that relationship. And so be intentional about the relationships where maybe you want to reduce friction, maybe where, and they might have shown up poorly too, right? This is an analysis of them. It's an analysis of you. Where are you judging? Where are you maybe, showing one side of yourself where perhaps they're not seeing the real or the vulnerable you? And just being able to let somebody know that, hey, when we met or when we had that conversation, I showed up in a way that I didn't intend, and I apologize for that. I may have shown up prickly or not willing to collaborate or not willing to hear your point of view. And I did that because, frankly, I was feeling I was feeling some self-doubt, or I was feeling pressure to show up better, or to, put on a show in that presentation. And I apologize because I talked over you. It's not easy to do, but like most things, as we develop that muscle, it not only gets easier, but it will also help you to go in eyes wide open into future situations where you will show up better and be more connected in the future regardless. So you'll, in essence, by breaking down that barrier for yourself, you're honestly going to have to apologize less going forward because you will be more proactively centered and seeking the perspectives of others.
Thank you. As you're listening, think about times that you made an amend and what the impact of that was, and use that as an inspiration to make amends that seem appropriate today. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast together with Carson Heddy. I'm your host, Hilke Faber. This is the podcast where we help connect teams and leaders more deeply to each other, themselves, and their purpose. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Connected Teamwork Podcast by Growth Leaders Network. Take a moment to reflect on what you learned today that can help build your team. Also, if you like, think about one of your team members and what you appreciate about them. Let them know. Enjoy connecting more deeply to what is great about them. And see you next time at the Connected Teamwork Podcast.